Hello and welcome to this episode of Hampton Roads Business Live. My name is Rory Graham and I'm your host, and today we have the pleasure of having with us Nichole Williams from the Forensic Analysis and Engineering Corporation. Welcome.
Thank you.
I know what you do, but I'm sure a lot of people don't. Could you give us an overview of what is Forensic Analysis and Engineering Corporation?
Sure, I'd love to. Well, Forensic Analysis and Engineering Corporation has been in business for over 47 years now. Mm-hmm. We're headquartered in Hampton, Virginia. Mm-hmm. We really have a national and international footprint. We have locations as north as Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and as south as Miami, Florida, and all the way out to the Pacific West is Honolulu, Hawaii. And we're no stranger to...
I bet everybody wants to be in that office.
Well, we all try to get there from time to time, but as much as we can. Forensic engineering is really a fascinating sort of arena that we dabble in, and most people are familiar with the concept of forensics. But forensic engineering is really a lot more different and more complex than your typical CSI and what you see on TV. Forensic engineering is the scientific and analytical methodology of really finding out why things happen. Right. Why do buildings collapse, or how did a roof cave in, or products fail, right, or a boat catches on fire, and those types of things.
Okay. All right, so we're going to go into some of the services that you provide because it is a list. Let's talk about like mechanical failures.
Sure.
All right, now because you mentioned that. All right, give us an example of a mechanical failure and how you might be called in.
Absolutely. And so let's use just a very basic example of a construction site. On a construction site, you have lots of heavy machinery and heavy equipment. Mm-hmm. And there is a tractor that fails for whatever reason, and maybe might collapse into a building or run someone over. Mm-hmm. Let's just say cause injury to a person, or cause injury to a building, or just fail. Okay. and stop production. And so then we're called in. And we're called in to really establish why. Why did that piece of equipment fail?
Was it operator error? Was it a mechanical error?
Correct. So the forensic mechanical engineer would go to the site, interview the operator, interview the company and those that are affiliated with that particular job, that construction site. Mm-hmm. And it could take hours, it could take days to figure out why, but the mechanical engineer will go in and
you also do like the weight of the material and the speed things are going and all of that. You take all those factors into consideration.
Absolutely. And in fact, what you're talking about is the incorporation and usage of forensic science. And now what makes Forensic Analysis and Engineering Corporation so unique amongst other forensic engineering firms is our use of forensic science where necessary.
Right. Now, it's really, it can be extremely complicated. I've worked with on a couple of cases where they did like an accident recreation or something.
Yes.
And I know that you can create animations of what happened.
Absolutely.
And all, but that takes into effect the mass of everything involved, the speed, the gravitational forces, everything.
Sure.
And it's not like you see on TV. I mean, if you watch Bones or you watch CSI, it's like in 5 minutes they have this animation where and it's like, no way, but you can put that up with the 10-minute DNA test.
Right.
But what you do is it's very exact science.
It is.
Because you have to testify in court with this sometimes.
Absolutely, and we are held, as professional engineers, we're held to a higher standard of ethics. And all of our findings are backed by science. and investigative methods that our experts use. We have over 45 forensic engineers that have a combined experience level of more than 500 years, combined experience. We have worked on more than 10,000 jobs or projects or cases, depending on the type of client that we've done work with. So we really have a lot of experience. When you partner with Forensic Analysis and Engineering Corporation, you're not just getting the science and the expertise, you're also getting that 500 years experience, more than 10,000 jobs worldwide.
Right. And let's talk about a couple of these other ones. We just mentioned mechanical failures, personal injury.
There's a lot of overlap, and this is why working with a firm like ours
that's multifaceted.
Because we are a multi-specialty boutique forensic engineering firm. So we don't just have one specialty, whether it's a structural specialty. We have chemical engineers, we have biomedical engineers, we have product, defect experts, civil engineers, forensic engineers. So when we use the example earlier of a mechanical failure, if the piece of equipment would have injured a person, then we're also talking about personal injury.
Okay,
so it could be a case, exactly. It could be a case where there's a mechanical failure, or it could be a fire that caused the piece of equipment to fail, that caused the personal injury. So there really is sort of a...
Do you find that there's a lot of domino effects?
It is, very much so.
That's what I would think.
In our business, it very much so. And that's one of the advantages of working with a firm like ours.
Right. Okay, can you give us an example of a product defect?
Sure. One of the more recent examples that I can provide is a manufacturing company in the South that was producing sort of like a juicy, yogurty type of snack for children. This manufacturer was experiencing a leakage in its product after a certain time period. So the product was being generated. It was sitting on the shelf for several weeks, and then mysteriously, the product started leaking out of the packages. So we were called in to find out why that was happening. And this was a potential large client loss that this manufacturer was looking at. They were going to lose this client if they didn't figure out why this was happening in their facilities. So we were called in to investigate why that was happening. And we looked at mechanical factors, we looked at environmental factors, the moisture in the air, the chemicals that were used to package the products. So it's a very complex process. It's also very fascinating as well. I mean, we've seen it all.
Did you figure it out?
We did.
Were they happy?
They were.
They were.
They
Okay,
were.
that's good. All right. Okay. What would be like a structural defect? Is this like a building was built, but it was built wrong?
Could have been.
Maybe can't support the roof or the floor.
It could. I mean, there are so many different variations of a structural defect. Ranging from when hurricanes happen and the walls collapse. 9 times out of 10, it's caused by the hurricane. But if it's not, or if the client can't figure out why, or if it's collapsing a certain way and it wouldn't have been caused by the hurricane, or one wall is damaged and the other 3 are not, we're called in to figure out, was this an issue prior to the hurricane or the natural disaster?
And you can tell that.
We can.
Really? Okay.
We really take...
I think after a hurricane, there might not be a whole lot to test.
Well, that is more...
Maybe I'm thinking more tornado,
sure.
but...
That's cut and dry,
yeah.
sure. But there are examples. It could be an example of a government building where one side of the building is, leaning, or, it could be something very minor, but also very major. That's causing an impact or a shift in someone's life.
Okay. And marine investigations is the last one I'll ask you about, then we'll move on to some other things, but marine investigations.
Sure, we have a subsidiary called Forensic Marine Investigations, FMI. What Forensic Marine Investigations does is everything nautical, basically, everything related to boats and yachts and ships
like
and
a boat accident or
fires, electrical problems. We get called in from insurance companies that may not be able to establish why a fire occurred in a particular portion of the vessel or the boat. And so one of our forensic marine investigators will go to the scene and establish why. It could also be cargo container losses and issues that happen with the transportation of goods and products overseas. We are no stranger to those types of cases also. But one thing I did want to note was that Forensic Marine Investigations, we have 3 investigators that are IANI certified, and there are only 125 marine investigators that hold this special certification in the world, and we have 3 of them. It's the International Association of Marine Investigators. It's a very prestigious certification to have.
Okay, now let's just talk about, now that we've talked about what you do, let's talk about who you do it for.
Sure.
Okay, so who are the type of clients that you work for?
Well, our clientele is really broad, but generally speaking, we work with risk managers, chief operations officers, safety managers, attorneys for both plaintiff and defense.
Okay, so you do both sides.
Correct, we do both sides. Government agencies and municipalities, insurance companies, large insurance companies, and third-party, claims providers, adjusters. So it really runs the gamut.
Okay, so how have you seen the industry change?
Well, speaking specifically in the corporate arena, one of the things that we have noticed is 5 years ago, companies could stand to lose $50,000, $100,000 a month in production. When something happens and they can't establish why in the chain of supply that breaks the production to cause the profit loss, that's not necessarily the case today. So companies are starting to invest upfront in bringing in firms like forensic engineers to identify issues pre-incident. So before a particular piece of equipment fails that maybe, let's say a large manufacturer just purchased. So they bring us in, investigate, check out the equipment, identify any potential issues that could come in
that's a buyer does that, a buyer of the equipment, or the guy who made the equipment?
It would be the company that purchased the equipment.
Okay. You'd think maybe the buyer the person who made the equipment might want you to check it out before they started selling.
It could also be that as well.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense.
They could absolutely do that. If it's a manufacturer that may be experiencing an interruption in production at a particular facility or site, and they may not know why, and they have experts of their own. They may have engineers, and if they do, their engineers may know exactly what the issue is. But if they need third-party validation, they're going to come to us to get it.
Okay. All right. And so you talked about risk managers, insurance companies, attorneys hiring you. What is that process like when let's say there's an automobile accident, they're trying to determine, say it's an attorney, and they're trying to determine who was driving.
Sure.
They were thrown from the car.
Sure.
So they call you and they have that kind of a case. So what is the process? Do they meet with you, or what happens?
That's a great question, Rory. Because we value long-term relationships, it's very important to us that we really get to know our clients. We learn a little bit about the case. What are the goals of the case? what are the circumstances surrounding the case, they would contact us and speak with one of our forensic engineers that would be assigned to the case. But let's just take a step back, and let's say they don't know if they need an expert. You know, maybe they think that one could enhance their case, or you know, maybe they're just looking for some advice. They can call our offices at any time and speak with us at no cost, and we'd be happy to help provide our opinion on, you know, whether or not to pursue an expert.
So whether you could help them or not.
That is correct.
So you could
Absolutely.
say, well, what we could tell you is we could tell you how fast the car was going and who was driving and what happened in the accident.
Correct.
If that's important to you, then
Correct.
yes.
Correct. Yeah, that attorney would, you know, and there would be dialogue, you know, and we would want to know some details, you know, without getting too deep into the case, but absolutely. And then we could tell them, you know, we use forensic science. They won't need to hire an outside firm in order to get DNA samples, or is there saliva on the steering wheel that could identify which person was driving, because the example that you gave is very commonplace. People get ejected essentially from their seat, and you know, let's say they're underage and they've been getting into a little trouble, and they switch seats, and you know, we can determine who was sitting where. I
guess technology's helped out in that too, because in their little black boxes in some of the newer cars now that have all that information.
And it captures the data. It really does do a good job of capturing the data.
Yeah, so okay. All right, and one thing I thought of when we were talking, we mentioned biomedical. Do you do malpractice, medical malpractice, where maybe you have something's happened in an operation, didn't go the way they thought? I don't mean like they left a sponge in, but
sure.
I mean something that isn't quite as obvious.
Sure.
You do that? Okay.
Sure, we absolutely do. And we do a lot of work also in the sort of elder law arena. And you know, let's use a piece of equipment as an example. And most hospital beds and nursing beds have bed alarms. How did the bed alarm fail? Why didn't the alarm go off? Why? So it's not necessarily just medical devices per se, but it also could be equipment that may have caused a death or an injury.
So you're kind of like CSI on steroids.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So it's really fascinating. I would imagine your job is kind of like mine, different every day. You know.
It really does change, and sometimes we don't know if we're going to be in Florida, Virginia, or Malaysia.
You know, if you need a video in Hawaii, I'm your guy. So I'd love to go to that.
We'll give you a call.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Is there anything that I haven't touched on that you'd like to mention?
We're celebrating our 47th year in business, and
congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's quite an achievement. Most people don't go 5, so.
We are one of the oldest forensic engineering firms in the country. We've been around for a long time, and we owe it all to our clients, folks that have trusted us with some of their most difficult, complicated cases and situations. And we've really enjoyed that success, and we owe it all to our clients and continuing. So.
Okay, well, you had how many cases did you say?
Over 10,000.
Over 10,000. Wow. Okay, that's a lot of experience. Okay, well, if you have a problem that you would like to have analyzed, or you have a case that just doesn't feel right, and you'd like to have it checked out, or you're not even sure you have a case and would like a consultation about it to see whether a forensic team could help you, give Nichole a call. The information for Forensic Analysis and Engineering Corporation is at the end of this video, and the contact information is also on this page. And I'm sure with all this experience, they could certainly help you out. Thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate you coming in. Very fascinating interview.
Absolutely.
And look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you so much.
All right.